Hello, everyone, and thank you for coming to our latest social box. Today, we're going to be interviewing a bunch of podcasters for our Podcasting on Steroids event. So we have Dr. Terry, who's going to introduce the rest of our panel. Dr. Terry, if you want to go ahead and turn your camera and mic on. Here we go. And I'm going to take my leave. Best of luck. Enjoy. And we're excited to have you in. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you so very much, Christopher. I don't know why Christopher didn't introduce himself, or maybe he's just a rock star and everybody already knows who he is. Thank you so very much for the invitation and the introduction, Christopher, and very cool design. Based on all of the comments in the chat, everyone said the video is fire, and it's certainly a way to truly start out what is going to be an amazing discussion. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, depending on which part of the world you might be tuning in from. We understand that the LinkedIn family is a global family, and so we wanted to acknowledge everyone across the globe and acknowledge your time zones. I am Dr. Terry Carell-Reed. Pleasure to serve you in the capacity of moderator for this awesome panel, and I bring you salutations from the beautiful island of Jamaica. So I want you to drop in the chat, let me know what flag, what territory, what country, what city, what state you might be representing, just so that, oh, NYC is in the building. Hey, New York, what? Lots of New York, Jamaica, period. Jamaica is in the building. Thank you. So I see Vancouver, Canada. Jamaica is coming in. Who I see a lot of yard is Canada, Jamaica. So we know that it's going to be a massive party. I see Colorado, Seattle. Thank you so very much. I see the party is already starting in the chat. So why are we here? The name of this series or this particular panel discussion is Podcasting on Steroids. There are over 865,000 podcasts, over 2 million episodes on the internet. Right now, as we speak, people are actually creating accounts. So it's a big deal. People have been able to build audiences, build community, and also monetize and make money. So for those of you who might be wondering where to get started, you are in the right place. And if you've already started, but you're kind of stuck and stagnant and you don't know what else to do, you're in the right place. And even if you are a veteran and you just want to level up, guess what? You are in the right place. I see New Jersey in the building. We have some rock stars who are a part of the podcasting ecosystem. I'm going to bring them onto the virtual stage, and we are going to get right into the conversation. So let's get started with, I think everyone knows him. He's a superstar on the LinkedIn platform. He's always on my timeline. Junaid Iqbal. And he is the host for the podcast, the No Degree Podcast. Hi, Junaid. How you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm excited.
Nice. Welcome. And this lady actually needs no introduction. She was on the cover of Podcast Magazine. She literally took podcasting to a completely different level. You guys put your hands together for Hala Taha, who is the podcast host, of Young and Profiting Podcast. Welcome, Hala.
Hey guys, happy to be here.
Nice, and congratulations on making it on the cover. That's a really big deal. Welcome again. Ben Baker. Now, let me tell you something. Ben Baker is the man in charge when it comes to helping companies create their own podcast, whether internally or externally, to ensure that they're engaging audiences that are relevant and specific to a niche. Ben Baker, podcast host for Hire. Welcome.
Hey, great to be here. I'm excited about this.
Very, very nice. Welcome to the show. Fela, I probably should say Fela Davis, who is representing One of One Productions. It's a podcast studio that basically caters to the booming business of podcasts. If you have any questions, she's definitely the person who is here to assist you in terms of coming up with the right equipment, knowing what to do, and creating that amazing atmosphere for you. Last but not least, I want to make sure I'm not leaving out any of my panelists. The man who is all the way, I think in the UK, it's after midnight, but he's gonna bring down the house. Nick Bradley, who is the podcast host of Scale Up Your Business podcast. Welcome, Nick. I know he was here earlier.
He was here. I saw him.
Okay,
there he is.
He is. Okay, so now we have all of our rock stars. I'm giving Nick's video a chance to. Oh, Nick, we love your backdrop. Yeah, Your backdrop, Nick, is really cool. I'm very jealous right now. Welcome and thank you for being here. So guys, we have a lot to unpack in a very short space of time. Before we start taking questions from the audience, let me just ask each of you very quickly, very briefly, to let us know when and why you started the podcast you started. I'm going to start with Hala.
When and why I started the podcast. So I started the podcast as a little bit of revenge. I was working in corporate. I started my career in radio at Hot 97 years prior, and I worked at a radio station for about 3 years as an intern for free. And then they didn't hire me after I worked there for free and dropped out of school and really did everything in my power to be the best like associate producer that I could be. They wouldn't pay me. They wouldn't hire me. So I went and I started a website and went back to school, and that blew up. I almost got a show on MTV, and they filmed me all summer, and then they pulled the plug and didn't air the show. And so again, I was like left back, like, you know, had to start from ground zero. So I went into corporate and I was like, okay, forget it. I'm not going to be famous. I'm not going to get on a mic. Like, this is not for me. I'm just going to get a regular marketing job. And so I got a job at HP. And, you know, really became the face of the young employees, started this whole thing called the Young Employee Network. And then I was supposed to be the president of the Global Young Employee Network. And they didn't give me that position, even though I was the most qualified. So I was like, all right, I'm just going to start my own podcast because I want to be a leader and I want to have a voice. And so I started it for revenge purposes. I was like, I'm going to like have the biggest podcast, and they're going to be like, damn, we messed up with Hala. And so, so that's why I started it. It was totally for revenge. And all of my successes, I feel like, have come on the heels of failure. So it was just, I used that failure to motivate me to start something new.
That is absolutely amazing. I see Rochelle, best revenge ever is success. It's just amazing how you got rejected, and it just became your redirection, which, by the way, I forgot to tell you guys, I'm the host of my own podcast called Redirection with Terry Carell because of stories like that. And in case you don't know, Hala's podcast is actually the #1 education podcast across the platform. So that's to show you that her revenge absolutely paid off. So let me go across to Jonaid. I'm really interested in knowing about yours because yours literally is the No Degree podcast. So when did you start it? Why did you start it?
So before I answer it, I know there are a lot of people in the audience who have podcasts. So if you have a podcast in the audience, drop it into the chat, drop your podcast in the chat so other people can know sort of why you're here. Now, I started my podcast in around August of 2019. Podcasts were sort of growing. I remember 2017, 2018, that's when they really started growing, 2019. And then I kind of saw an opportunity, right? Because the thing is, nodegree.com, I help people without college degrees find meaningful jobs that pay well. And the fact is, I want to share the stories of people who are successful without college degrees, because oftentimes you see this person, they work at Twitter, they work at a Google, but you don't know how they got there. There are a lot of things behind the scenes. Like you see Hala, right? She's very successful. But if you look at her story, there's a lot of struggles and failures and highs and lows. So I kind of want to share those stories. And the thing is, podcasts, I love talking to people. I just love talking to people, love reaching out. And I at one point, to market myself, I was trying to get on a lot of podcasts and it just didn't work. Then I started a podcast. And I've never had to ask to be on a podcast ever again. People just search up, they'll go, and it just worked out. And then it's just part of my brand. And the beauty is that I had a lot of people asking for advice. And I was repeating the same things over and over. How do I prepare for an interview? How do I find a job? So I was like, how about I recorded an episode on how to prepare for an interview? People ask me for help. Boom. Now it's like I could still help them while still having some free time. Because as you know, when you're juggling a podcast, recording is just one small aspect of the whole thing. So it was just like about to free up my time while still adding value to my network.
I love it. I love the fact that you've turned the narrative on its head and you're showing successful people who don't have degrees or might have dropped out of college, but showing you that it can still be done. Fantastic work. I'm going to head over to Nick. Scale up. Scale up your business. Talk to me about when you started and why was this important to start to begin with?
Yeah, so I started the podcast in 2019 and I did it. I'll give you the short version of a long story because it's quite interesting. I was involved in doing big acquisitions and deals, if you like, with private equity for about 10 years. and very, very successful financially in terms of being involved in that. But sometimes, what you see from the outside looking in isn't the real story, right? And I was getting eaten up inside because have you ever seen Billions with Bobby Axelrod, or back in the day, there was a movie called Wall Street, right? With Gordon Gekko. The world of that sort of acquisitions and deals is pretty aggressive. And I had a bit of a breakdown. And one night I literally went to bed and I cracked the back of my teeth by clenching through stress on my jaw.
Wow.
True story, right? I woke up and this was like swollen. It was like being punched. And anyway, this goes on, but I won't keep going with the story. I decided that I needed to change everything and I needed to give back to the world, so to speak, to make a bigger impact and make a bigger contribution. And so I spoke to my coach at the time and he said, why don't you go out there and tell your story and get your message out there and try and help entrepreneurs build freedom, wealth, and impact. And I thought, well, you know what? I'm going to do that. And the way I'm going to do that is through a podcast. And that was the formation, the foundations of Scale Up Your Business.
Wow, Nick, we're so grateful that you cracked the back of your tooth, because if you didn't, maybe you wouldn't have gotten the epiphany, but
well, they're all looking good now anyway, but yeah, at the time they weren't.
Thank you. So Ben, I'm moving across to you, because so far we've heard about a lot of persons who took their own stories, their own experiences, and it kind of helped to inspire them to impact and influence other persons. You have a very unique positioning, and I want you to tell us when and why. Why did you begin your podcast, or the type of service that you offer?
Sure. I've been podcasting, almost 10 years now. Mostly as a guest. And early on, I dabbled in it and this, that, and everything. And about 5 years ago, somebody said, you need your own podcast. I'm like, no, I don't. And then kept kind of saying, you need another podcast. No, I don't. Yes, no. 6 months later, I finally, said, okay, what do I want to do? How do I want to create a podcast that's that value? And I created the Your Living Brand.live show. And this show is all about how do you help business owners, CEOs, leaderships, C-suite people, senior managers, understand the challenges that they're having and that other people have and how to fix them. And we're 270 episodes into that. But during COVID, February 2020, I was set to speak all over the world. I was coming to Jamaica. I was going to be in Australia. I was going to be through the Caribbean, Europe, across the United States. And within 72 hours, everything's gone. Everything's gone. Everything's shut down. I lost the full bingo card. I was able to sit there and say, everything's gone. I got a blackout bingo card. I lose.
Yeah.
And the question is, what do you do now? And what I realized is that companies are struggling. Companies are struggling of how to remain effective, how to engage their employees, how to let people know what's going on, why it's going on, where they are, where they're going, and what the challenges and successes that are going on. So we created the Podcast Host for Hire program, and it's designed for large to enterprise companies to be able to run internal-only podcasts for them. And we do everything from strategy to voice the podcast, to distribution, to editing, etc. And what it's designed to do is to enable them to have a better holistic view of where the company is, to see the whole chessboard, to understand what's going on in LA, Bangalore, Maine, Bangladesh, wherever their company is, to have an understanding of the entire company. So that's really where we've gone. But it's 8 to 10 years in the running, and and hundreds of interviews to get there. But it's been a fun journey.
Very nice. And it's certainly amazing how each person, I hope the persons who are watching, you realize that when you're trying to, start your niche or start your community, you have to be solving some pain point, right? You have to be creating some solution. Now, fella, based on the chat that I see, everyone says that you hands down win background. The purple plush couch, the lighting in the back, you just chilling. We want to know from you, because you also have a very unique posturing like Ben, but in the form of the productions, the studio, creating an atmosphere for persons who want to start podcasting or who are podcasting. Why this, and when did you start?
I started a podcast 3 years ago, and it actually came from video, and it came from LinkedIn. Funny enough, 8 years ago or so, when LinkedIn started letting you post content. Like I remember when it was just all text. And they were literally ranking you 1, 2, 3, 4 by how much content you put out. I realized that they were doing that, and I lived in the New York City area. I noticed the more information I put in, which was video, I was posting, you know, a place I was getting paid $50 a night at. I would record because actually my background is an audio engineer. I've been an audio engineer for 20 years. So I moved here 12 years ago. And I was, you know, working at small clubs, recording gigs, and then posting them to YouTube and then posting to LinkedIn. LinkedIn didn't even have an integrated video system at the time. You just had to literally take, So I started at the very beginning of that, and it put me at the top of audio engineer in New York City. And I was like, oh, that should be dope. I mean, you know, it's New York City. You never know who's looking. 7 months later, I get a call. Well, I get a DM on LinkedIn from, at the time, 4-time Grammy Award winner, Christian McBride, jazz bassist. He was like, I have a show with 92nd Street Y in New York City in 2 weeks. Are you available? I like what I saw online. He came like the next week to a show, one of my $50 shows in Brooklyn. And the next week, I started going around the world. He has like 6 different bands. So he had a big band, a 17-piece jazz orchestra, trios, quartets, everything. And I was mixing everybody I had ever wanted to mix, from Philip Bailey with Earth, Wind and Fire.
Wow.
I mean, just Dee Dee Bridgewater, just artists, just like everything acoustical I ever wanted to do. So I ended up, you know, I got a second passport in that 7 years. I mean, went to Africa, Asia, Australia, everywhere. That was cool. But in between, since he was a Grammy Award winner, I got endorsements for microphones, everything that I was working on. So I realized, oh, this content thing worked before. So I started doing content. And I started doing like 5-minute videos of musicians and producers that we loved, you know, that were doing heavy stuff, like working at Skywalker Sound, you know, doing stuff like that. So we realized it took too much energy to do a 5-minute video. We were like, and we were cutting away too much great information from these masters. So we were like, let's go long form. This thing called podcasting seems to not be going anywhere. And I remember when it was like thousands of dollars for, you know, or hundreds for server space. So that's why I didn't get into it until like years late, you know, until like 3-4 years ago, when you had all these, you know, Lisbon and all of this stuff started popping up, and it became affordable. So once it became affordable, that was it. We started reviewing more gear. To now I'm a reviewer for for Podcast Pro newsletter and Pro Sound News, Pro Sound News magazine. So I'll do reviews for all the podcast equipment, everything, plugins and stuff like that, because my background is as an audio engineer and now podcaster. And so that was my beginning into it. And then that was how the Art of Music Tech, my podcast, started. Actually, it was a 5-minute video. You can go on YouTube and see original video, but now we do long form podcasts. So
that was just the beginning.
That was just the beginning.
That was the first week.
That was like the first week. No, that's amazing, and I think it's very interesting, and it's informative and instructive for persons who are listening to realize that it's not about looking like someone else or creating a podcast that mirrors someone else, but actually using your craft, your talent, what you know, and helping someone else. Mine is Redirection with Terry Carell, because I went to Cuba, studied veterinary medicine, came back to Jamaica to practice as a vet, and ended up hosting events all over the world, and it's just how your rejection or disappointment can easily be redirection. So it really is next level. So now that we've gotten an opportunity to hear when and why you guys started, let us take it from the point of view of persons who might be watching. There's so much information on the internet, which mic, which equipment, spending $3 million to get started, which platform to use. Can you guys recommend, and I'm sure it's very different for maybe some of you, but for persons who might be thinking of starting, and right now it's analysis by paralysis because they don't know what to choose. Hala, what do you recommend for persons who are just starting, maybe on a small budget or no budget? What do you recommend for them to them starting?
Okay, so if you have no budget and you want to get started and you want to test the waters and you don't know if a podcast is something you want to eventually invest in, I would say start off with like a live show on like LinkedIn or a live show on Instagram or Facebook, and then get your feet wet, see if you like it, get practice, and then if you do like it, invest in it. Some people would say use Anchor. It's a free way to record and host. The problem with Anchor is that you actually don't own your content. So
Exactly.
I would say don't do that unless you are, unless you know that it's just practice and it's not going to be your breakout show and you just want to, get your feet wet, use Anchor. But if you actually want to have a long-term show that you believe in, don't use Anchor. In terms of the audio equipment, I have a Shure mic here. It's a USB mic and it's an XLR mic. And this is like $350. And I'm, a really big podcaster and I use a $350. You don't need like $1,000 mic. So I think like this is a great mic that you guys can invest in. They have an Audio Technica that's like $80 that you guys can invest in. That's good too. And then recording, just use a platform that's meant for podcast recording. So Riverside.fm or Squadcast, something that was really meant for audio and video. And you could just get like a $90 webcam. That's what I use. Like you really don't need to go crazy. So that's my advice.
All right. So don't go broke before you actually invest. Johnny, you wanted to add?
Yeah. So Hala, if you have your links, you feel free to drop. Hala has some discount codes for the platform she uses. So she'll, when she can, she'll drop it by. I started with the $30 mic. It's the Shure SM48. You can either go USB mic. One of the drawbacks of a lot of USB mics is they're condenser mics. So that means if you have a fan running in the background, it picks it up. So I kind of sort of recommend dynamic mics because then even if you have background noise, I remember one time I was recording with a condenser mic and my friend's fridge turns on for 20 minutes at a time. So we have to wait for that to stop. So you run into these issues. So you can start with the Shure SM48. The next level up is the Shure SM58. It's a $100 mic. Now, just realize that you need something called a preamp box. It looks, I don't want to sort of cut out my audio, but it looks something like, just this little box right here. So you plug in the microphone and this plugs into your computer. You can adjust the gain so I can be real quiet, or you can make it go higher. So I would recommend something like that. And then you can always invest and improve your equipment, along the way. I know Hala used to do on the Blue Yeti before she got this Shure mic, and you just invest along the way. Now I use the EV-RE20. That's more of like a radio mic. So that's where my voice sounds nicer than it actually does in person. So, feel free to do that. And audio editing always makes a big difference. But I would recommend Riverside.fm. I use it for the video. The audio quality is good. And then Podbean is a good hosting platform, which I really recommend.
Okay, that's awesome. I think I use Podbean as well, but very good point. I think all the pointers have been very good and persons have said it in the chat that it's okay to start off small. And as Hala said, if you realize it's something you want to do for the long term, as Johnny just said, you can start investing in things, in more things. Nick, is there anything you'd like to add in terms of equipment? Kind of stressing out about what equipment, what hosting platform, what do we use? What do we do?
So I've got the Ferrari of everything here, right? So I've got the Shure SM7B, I've got Rodecaster Pros and all that, but I'll show you what I started with. I started with this thing, which is a Behringer C1. This is a 20 quid mic from Amazon. And to be honest with you, in my first sort of year of podcasting, this is all I used, plugged into a Zoom H4. And then I just sent stuff to a production agency that I found on Fiverr. And my podcast went to #1 in the UK off the back of that. So the point I want to say is you don't need the Ferrari. right?
Hi.
Once you start to get some traction, then invest in good gear because it becomes your thing. It can become your livelihood, but you don't need that to start with. So I recommend, if you want to start with 20 quid, start with this thing.
Yeah. No, that's an awesome point. And I see Usama saying boom, and that's right. At the end of the day, if we are caught up too much in the equipment and not actually in the quality of the actual content, it won't matter. If you have the Bentley or the Ferrari of equipment, you actually have to focus on the quality of your content. Ben, I'm coming to you, but Fela, I mean, you have a lot of expertise around microphones and different kinds of equipment for persons who, whether they're starting out or not. Is there anything in particular that you're saying they should not, like, do not skim, do not skip, do not go past, go get this?
Yeah. Actually, yeah, I say to at least get a USB mic. And that's what I'm giving away, which is what I say, if you don't have any money or just a very bare minimum, this is $40. And we actually we have a online e-store. I'm dropping a discount code right now in the chat. Everyone, you get 10% off. Basically, I have everybody's mic up here in my store, and you can get 10% off until Sunday. So and we're also giving away the bare minimum mic. Like, if you want to really take your podcast from it, I see a few people said that they were using their iPhone earbud joints or their if you want to go a little bit higher than that, at least, and invest like $40 or, like you said, 20 quid into at least a USB mic, and even better with Hala with the 2-in-1 with the USB and XLR, that makes it super flexible and being able to go into an audio interface, which when you want to get a little bit, got a little bit more money, you want to have something in between your microphone and your computer. And that box usually makes you sound better. It's not just it makes it louder. No, it's the preamps in like Scarletts and UAs and stuff like that. That gives you a nice color, and it makes you want to listen more, like me. Like, don't you? I think everybody kind of likes how it sounds when.
Yes, ma'am.
and this is $150 mic. We're also selling our premium and standard audio kits. So you'll see in this discount code that I put down that you can look at all of the stuff that we have as a whole thing, and it comes with a military waterproof case. So with with the logo, so you can purchase that a 2-person and a 1-person kits from our store, again with 10% off, because you're coming to this badass panel.
Thank you. I saw Enrique in the chat saying this is no pizza giveaway, and we just want to remind you that at the end of the discussion, I'm going to re-invite Christopher to the stage, and we're going to do like a digital raffle. So once you registered, keep your fingers crossed, you will get to walk away with one of those microphones, courtesy there of One of One Productions. Ben, let me ask you a question. If you build it, will they come? If you build it, will they come? There's so many people talking about personal branding, building your profile, building your community. So I'm just going to go out, get my podcast, and the people will come. Do we do it like that, or do we build the community and then the podcast?
You know what? I hate the phrase "build it and they will come." I truly do, because the world is going to come to your door when they see value. It's not because you built it, it's because you built it for them. And you built it with them in mind. You built it for a very specific audience with very specific needs, very specific wants, and you're going to solve a problem for them. And if you can build something that's not this 12-slice toaster that's supposed to be for everybody, but rather, as I said, a podcast about 57 Chevys that talks to people that are absolutely passionate about 57 Chevys. They're going to tell everybody about it. They're going to tell everybody who loves the same things they do. And they're the ones who are going to build your podcast for you. But if you're trying to just be this generic podcast that says, oh, I'm going to have 500,000 downloads, by the time I'm 6 months into this, you're either really lucky or you're dreaming. I think that there's, podcasts grow because people like you do things like this. It's a Seth Godin. You build a small audience, and they tell people, and they tell people, and they tell people. But it's done because of the hard work. It's because you show up week after week after week, and you just give. You give for them. You make their lives better. You give them stuff that they didn't know that they needed. And you sit there and make that. So, it's not about I'll build a podcast and everybody will show up. You need to be building a podcast with certain people in mind, invite them into the conversation, keeping them involved, and let them become champions of the brand.
Amen. I see people in the chat saying, drop in the wisdom, drop in the gems and the nuggets, Ben. Thank you so very much. Hello. So we're hearing that it's important to, when you're putting your podcast together, to think of the person, the person who you want to cater to, the person you want to service. Now, I'm going to ask you, how do you go about even selecting the right guests and having the right conversation? We know that some persons come with scripts, they come with scripted questions, and there are others that are just conversational that kind of go with the flow of what the guest is saying. What's your process, or do you have a particular recommended process?
Yeah. So the way that we do it at Young and Profiting Podcast is I'm really a podcast that I'd like to dive deep on one specific topic. So I'm not going to invite somebody to go talk about their company. We might touch on their career journey a bit, but mostly it's to uncover like one specific topic. So for example, like how to negotiate better, or how to overcome trauma, or just, it's always like one specific topic. And so typically what I do is I'm selecting either the guest or the topic. It can go both ways. So I'll go look at like the bestsellers list of 2021 and then go target some of those authors if I like their topic that they're talking about, because they obviously want to promote that new book, right? Or I'll go, for example, if I get a really big name, like Seth Godin came on my show, he's got a million things that we can talk about. So it's just, I focus on one thing that he's an expert on. And we talked about creativity, and like, that's what the whole episode was about. And it was really focused just on that one topic, so I could go super deep. So I think everybody has their own angle, but I think it's important to know what your show is about and not just pick guests for their following and stuff like that, but for the stories they can tell and for the content that you can bring out of them. And then in terms of your question on like preparation, and some guests want scripts, some guests, it's your show. So, if somebody, for me, I don't send any prep to my guests. Like, we send them logistics. I tell them I'm doing research. Once in a while, if somebody asks for questions, I'll be like, here are like the 10 things that we might talk about, but I don't give them questions, because I feel like anybody who I'm asking on my show typically has the experience and the speaking experience, and they don't want questions either. They don't have time for that. So it's like, but I would say, if you have people who aren't used to being on podcasts, you may want to give them questions, because it may help them be better prepared if you're not getting guests who typically go on podcasts or speak, or anything like that. I'd love to hear what Nick has to say on this topic, because I'm sure he has big guests too.
Yeah, I was literally gonna ask, Nick, when you're getting your guests, how do you prep? What's your process? How do you manage it to ensure that you get the best quality for your community?
Yeah, absolutely. It's very much been business related. So people like Jay Abraham have been on the show, and those sort of guys, if you're in the business world, you know who he is. John Lee Dumas, those sort of people. But for me, I don't prepare, right? And there's a reason for that. I like to be quite intuitive and present when I'm talking to someone. So my show is a conversation show. And quite often I'll get someone on there who may have a topic or an interest or a specialty, and they think the conversation is going to go in that direction, but I don't let it do that. And because for me, what it comes down to is I want to know what's underneath someone in terms of the decisions they've made and therefore what they've done. So I'm trying to understand the person behind what everyone else may think is there. And I found that because it's like that, the conversations, mine are quite long form interviews. They'll go over an hour, but we'll get into some things that people have never spoken about. And so that for me has been the secret, I suppose. I didn't plan to do it like that. It just happened organically. But then people have connected with me, and I built a community and a tribe around that, because they think they're coming to scale up their business, but what they're really getting is a conversation about mindset, belief, action, resilience, grit, all of these sort of things. And that's what's been the key thing for me.
Wow, Jamal actually says those are the best podcasts. Tell him, Nick, I don't paralyze myself with prep. Something, Janet, that Hala said was, you don't pick your guests because of, following. And that seems to be a trend, if I'm going to be very honest with you. We've seen people, start their podcast and they go for big names because they hope that they will bring their tribe and it will help them go into the stratosphere even faster. How important is it looking at the quality versus the quantity and aligning yourself with the right guests, even if they're not the most popular?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I always think about what the end goal is. Like, why did I start my podcast and who do I serve? Right. So I serve people without college degrees. So I focus on those topics. And I've gotten people pitches all the time. And I know all of you have podcasts, so you guys get pitched all the time for guests. And, a lot of times they're not on brand. Like, they'll be like, hey, I have a PhD in XYZ. And I was like, that's cool. But the name of it, and, it's sad because a lot of people, they won't even take the rejection gracefully. They won't even answer. So it's like, I always try to think of like, what is the goal of my podcast? Because if you don't have a specific goal in this day and age, yes, in 2015, 2017, you could have had a podcast literally on anything, on success. But now it's more competitive, right? People tune to shows for a specific reason. Like, I want people to tune to my shows because they don't have a college degree and they're focused on learning and mindset. Because you'll get pitched all the time. And if you don't have a topic, you will have so much trouble kind of selecting guests because people pitch you all the time like, hey, I can add value to your audience, but like, you have to really be specific. The other thing is, even if someone doesn't have like a big name out there, like I've seen some people, they're like, yeah, I love this guest. They're like, one of my best episodes is like an electrical contractor, right? The guy doesn't have a big presence, but you'd be surprised because if you search up electrical contractor, that's one of the few episodes in the sort of store that people find, right? I've seen people just succeed because they're specific with certain topics. So I try to be strategic in thinking about what is my audience looking for, what's cool, and what will they get value of. Like, I'm going to have like elevator repair person. I'm going to have like a welder, right? These people technically usually don't have big social media followings,
Correct.
But a lot of people are looking for that.
Right. And they usually have very interesting stories. By the way, Sid said in the chat that he's on your waiting list for when you open up your podcast to facilitate and accommodate guests who actually have degrees. So he says, fingers crossed, he's waiting on that. But certainly. Now, Junaid mentioned strategy. And Ben, I'm coming to you because even podcasters, Hala, Junaid, Nick, after you build such a huge following and tribe, it's only natural that people want to collaborate, right? They want to partner with you, and heck, they want to invite you on their podcast to try to tap in to your brand equity. How important is it that even as podcasters, you are intentional and strategic about the other podcasts that you yourself go on?
You know what? The podcasts that I go on, because I go on, 40, 50 podcasts a year. And the reason I do that, I go on about 40 to 50 podcasts a year. And the reason I do this is I want to learn what other podcasters do. I want to listen to the type of questions that they ask, how they run their show, how do they onboard me? When the show is over, what kind of materials do I get? What kind of thank you letter do I get? What kind of, what's their digital package like that I get on a weekly basis? And when I get all that, I learn and I make my show better. Because all of a sudden I get there and I go, wait a second here, that was really cool. I could integrate that into my package and I could make things better. Or somebody asked me a question that I went, that was a really cool question. I'm like you guys. I have no questions. I know the angle that I'm going to take the show in. I have the first question in my mind of what we're going to talk about. I have a signature question that I ask every single guest as they walk out the door. But other than that, it's a conversation. Mm-hmm. And I'm all about how do we create insight? How do we create a conversation? How do we do that? But by being on 40 to 50 shows, it gives me the ability to see what are other people doing out there. What do people do well? What do people not do well? Things like, even things like when you're listening to people's mics and you sit there going, wait a second, I really like the tone of your mic. What mic are you using? Mm-hmm. And or somebody who's an audiophile and just having a conversation with them off air about the different techniques that they're using. There's so much that I can learn from other podcasters and even rookie podcasters, because everybody has to start somewhere, and you sit there and go, okay, how can I glean from them, and what can I teach them? And that's how I was able to build my course. I have a course on teaching people how to podcast.
Beautiful.
And the reason I can do that is because I've been on so many people's podcasts. I know what goes well, what doesn't go well, what things people should be thinking about, what people shouldn't be thinking about.
That's very cool. I don't think I've ever heard that type of strategy. I know most of the time it's how do we strategize to get the right guests? How do we strategize to get the monetization? How do we strategize to get the collaboration? But I don't think I've ever heard it quite like that, where as a guest, you can actually learn more and glean more to take back and improve your own work. Now, and I'm gonna touch on monetization. I'm gonna come right back to those of you who've actually managed to monetize. But Phil, people are starting out, we don't have like fancy studios or, what have you. When you look around, we saw podcasts boom in 2020. The pandemic hit, people needed to be relevant. They needed to stay in touch with their communities. Based on the trend and the growth of these podcasts, what are the things that you think people are doing wrong? Like what are the hits and what are the misses? Fellow was like,
okay.
There's the whole show right there.
Oh yeah. I mean, as one of those audio files, as an audio engineer, I just at least a cheap mic. I always say at least get a microphone, something that just makes it that much more interesting to the human ear. Like there are certain frequencies that will make us just be like, I can't, and move on. Like it and realizing that you can't just stick with, oh, I'm just going to record on my phone for 4 seasons. So just putting a little bit into it. And you were asking the question too about the mindset about why you did a podcast. Even for me, it was a little bit more selfish because I realized the people that I wanted to talk to, I could get them if I said that I wanted to interview them. Because mostly, most people, especially in what I do, well, they're artists, so they're used to being on a stage. Mm-hmm. And so getting like a Patrice Rushen, getting to interview her, it was like, oh yeah, I do this all the time. But who gets to talk with Patrice Rushen, which she had the Men in Black theme song, like she was the original sample. Who gets to talk with her for an hour without an assistant coming in every 2 minutes and stuff like that? So you can be a little selfish with your reasons on why you want to do your podcast and get to speak to people that you want to get to know better and put it as a podcast. Just getting in front of them, because you never know what's going to happen after that. So another mindset thing to get into podcasting for.
Right. Thanks for that. Now, let me get to one of the big questions, right? Some of us do podcasting because we love it. Some of us want to do it because we hope it will be a stepping stone into lead generation or sales or helping to build our brand, right? The question is monetization. At what point do we know, okay, I can't continue to spend money on creating this podcast? At what time do we say, okay, I can reach out to a sponsor right now? Show me the money, I see Jamal saying. What KPIs and indicators am I to use now to leverage, to have that, that negotiation? What do we do if we've been in the space and now we think it's time to monetize? Who wants to take that question first? Show me the money.
How about you go first? I got a very different take on it, so you go for it.
Okay. Well, this could be a whole topic in itself, but I would say your question is like, when am I ready to make money off your podcast? You can start making off your podcast. You can make money off your podcast from day one. So first of all, you can do affiliate marketing, and you can sign up to be a Fiverr affiliate, an Audible affiliate, whatever. And that's what I started doing. And that gave me practice in the beginning to have commercials. And when I would say, this podcast is sponsored by Audible, even though I was just an affiliate partner, people were like, ooh, she's sponsored by Audible. So it makes you look good too. It gives you practice. So I would definitely say become an affiliate partner. The other way that I monetized my podcast before I started selling ads like I do now is through the people who came on my podcast. I started a marketing agency, and the people who'd come on my show would be like, oh my gosh, who does your marketing? It's so good. And then I would say, I do my marketing, and my target client are CEOs, celebrities, best-selling authors, and those are the people who come on my show. So I was able to grow my business super fast by doing that. And so I used my guests. I don't charge them to come on my show, but the types of people who come on my show happen to be the type of people who I would want to do marketing for my agency. So that worked out really good. And then in terms of ads, I would say you really want to try to get 5,000 downloads a month before you go and try to get advertising 5,000 downloads an episode, I would say is ideal. If you want to go get advertising, and that's not going to get you guys a whole ton of money. It's the CPM is typically $15 to $35 per 1,000 downloads. And so you can have multiple commercials per podcast. So that can help layer in some more money per episode, but it's not going to make you a millionaire. You really need to focus on growing your show. And I would much rather see new podcasters trading their commercials to keep growing their show rather than trying to monetize too quickly and kind of shooting themselves in the foot so they don't actually grow really fast. So that's my advice there.
Great pointers. Ben, you said you had a different perspective, a different take. What is that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Helen. One point is that I use my podcast to interview the people that are potential clients or potential partners. I'm looking at the thing. It says, okay, first of all, do they have a good story? Second of all, are they articulate, and are they going to be a good guest? Great. If that's the case, could they be a client eventually? And you've just spent an hour to an hour and a half, between production, post-production, conversation with this person, building know, like, and trust. And it's amazing when you have a conversation with them 3 weeks later, a month later, a month and a half later, when you post the show and have it. So, what do you do? Let's have a conversation. And all of a sudden you've opened a door that you could never have probably opened if you just tried banging on it from the front. It's a way of doing that. And to me, that's how I've always monetized the podcast. I also use my main podcast to be able to build podcasts for other people, to be a third party, white label podcaster for other companies. But I agree with you, is this affiliate marketing, especially for small, podcasts or people that are just starting podcasts. There's lots of people out there. In fact, I'm looking for people right now. There's lots of people out there looking for affiliate marketers that will pay you, on every time you sell something, we'll pay you some money based on you doing it. Yeah, exactly. And I'm always looking for people that are wanting to be affiliates, because it's good for me, it's good for them, because they get to grow their show. They get to be, like you said, with the Audible, it gives you some legitimacy and allows you to grow your show. And I think that people need to realize they're going to start small, and the success will come maybe in the third, fourth, fifth year. It's not something that is going to happen immediately. Overnight. You're going to be able to pay for things, but you know what? You're going to become successful, and once you finally figure out what your podcast is about, and for most people that takes 3 to 4 years.
Nice. On that note, Nick, your podcast is about scale up your business. How do you manage to scale up where it needs to be able to run on autopilot? It needs to even if it's not profitable, it needs to make sure that it's not draining you, financially. Are there any other pointers that you'd like to add that other persons can consider in the space, or that you considered?
Yeah, I mean, my sort of approach to it is similar to Ben's, actually. So when I started it wasn't necessarily to monetize. It was literally because I wanted to kind of build a bit of profile and give back and sort of balance things out, as I said, from my story. I made a decision from the very beginning. I wasn't going to take advertising or sponsorship, no matter how big the listenership got. But we've created multiple streams of income and revenue off the podcast. We've got 7 at the moment. And we call it, I've got a team behind this as well. It's what we call trickle down. So I've got coaching, consultancy, investment businesses. And similar to what Ben was saying, when I interview someone or I have someone come on the show, quite often, because of the rapport that is built, there is a secondary conversation that happens. I mean, I've done 2 investments in some quite sizable businesses off the podcast. I'm not going to go into the numbers because it's significant, but it's one deal can change your life, right? I've got a mastermind that we're launching in Miami at the end of this year, travel permitting, with 2 other people who have got 8-figure businesses that have come off the back of the podcast interview, and now I'm business partners with them. So again, I think if you've got a message, you've got a very clear audience, you're true to what you're trying to get across, you attract opportunities. And for me, it wasn't overly strategic in the beginning, but I've had to make it more of an ecosystem just because I've been consistent all the way through.
Fantastic. Junaid, I see Anastasia Williams in the chat, and she says, what about YouTube podcasts? We've actually seen more of it now, where persons lift the audio from the podcast and they kind of transfer it over to YouTube. And so, you may not necessarily see the persons visually, but you can sit back and listen to the podcast. Is there a difference? Is one better than the other? Is it better to just stick to one platform? What's your advice?
So, I mean, YouTube, I think Hala can attest to this. YouTube is a whole different game. It's a very visual platform. You got to come in looking like Nick, right? I would tell you that you got to come in looking like Nick, looking like Fela with the backgrounds and stuff. It's a different algorithm. It's a different language. So you have to kind of understand, because you're going to see that there are people who are absolutely crushing it on Instagram. They get like 4 likes on LinkedIn. There are people who crush it on LinkedIn. They can't do Instagram. So each thing has a different language. So you have to kind of understand, like, what do people look like for on YouTube, right? You have to have a certain style, even like the thumbnails and the captions, right? So if you're going to do something, make sure you understand the language. And I'm going to go back to the other question of demonetization. I use my podcast as a content marketing tool. A lot of people, I think a lot of people just think like, hey, you're going to make money right off the bat. If you use your podcast as part of your, funnel, as part of a content marketing tool, like, I'll tell you, there are some courses I've bought because I've listened to 5 episodes of their podcast. I'm like, this is the free advice I'm getting. I don't mind dropping 2 to 3K on a course. The other thing is, like, I do resumes and interview prep for people. There are people who've listened to 20 episodes and then they'll come to me, hey, you're my resume guy. Or, hey, I want you to, because your free advice is so good. Or you get people who they refer you. Like, there are people, a lot of my podcasts that they'll never necessarily use my services, but they'll be like, hey, you're the resume guy. I'm going to use you. Now, the beauty is, you don't have to sell them the same way. They like you. They trust you. They know your brand. They know what you're about. I don't have to spend like an hour convincing them. And then what happens is, now my time, all of our times are very limited, right? I tell people who are on the fence, I was like, look, here, listen to this. I have my reviews. If you don't want to use me, I'm not going to spend time convincing you to use me, right? I have reviews. I have a podcast. Because the type of person, if they listen to your podcast and they don't buy from you, they're probably never going to buy for you, right? Or they're the type of person who's not willing to invest. So I tell people, it's like, look, listen to this, check out my content, check out all this, and you'll save you a lot of time, right? In the beginning, I used to spend a lot of time convincing people to use me. Now it's like, look, I got the reviews, I've established myself. If you don't use me, I'd rather focus that energy and time into something else.
Oh my goodness. Somebody said, like, I see Daniela there saying meaningful conversation, very powerful conversation, definitely worth it. People are actually very happy that they tune in to hear this kind of information. And it's important because in a world that tells you vanity metrics is important and getting the best and people pleasing is so important, you kind of realize from these kinds of
Can I say one more thing? So
go right
can I say one more thing? So the other thing about a podcast is it's in your voice, right? When you send someone an article, they read it in their own voice and stuff. When someone listens to a podcast, it's in your voice. So you've already spoken to them for 1, 2, 3, 10 hours, right? And it's scalable. Like, I've had people who are like, hey, I have a question. I'm like, oh, listen to episode 42, because I want to be able to help everybody I can. There are so many people who can't necessarily afford my services and stuff, but I still want to be able to say, hey, you know what? You're in this career. You want to do this. Like, Hala has so many episodes on negotiation. If someone asks her a question on negotiation, go listen to the episode on Chris Voss. Go listen to this episode. And then what happens is you end up building true fans, like, who will support you, they'll support you on Clubhouse. They'll support you on Instagram. And it allows you to truly build community, because you're going to realize that companies, what do they buy? All these companies, they buy community, right? Like, why is Discord so powerful? Why is Clubhouse so powerful? Because of the communities built. And corporations have trouble building community, right? They have the money, they have the resources, but building community, there's this, you need soul, you need soul, right? So that's another thing that you can do through podcasting, really building community, really building trust.
Well, and I just want to add to that, because the content marketing is huge, because you're dealing with a podcast. If it's 35 or 40 minutes, you're dealing with about 8,000 words of text. You know, you can cut that into into small little blog posts. You can create little audiograms. You can call little video snippets. You can create tweets. You can create little memes. There's so many different things that you can take that one 35 or 40 minute piece, and it can become 35, 45, 55 pieces of content that can be shared across various different mediums. Because the majority of people may just watch that 30-second piece or that 2-minute piece. But if they're really curious, then they'll go back and listen to the full podcast. But there's a lot of people that won't, but they will listen to that short piece, and then they'll get in touch with you.
Absolutely. I mean, who was speaking?
That was me. I wanted to jump in on the podcast on YouTube thing.
Yes.
I think you should put the whole thing on there, because it's Google searchable. As many pieces of content that can go to YouTube, which is owned by Google, the better.
But they're so bad.
That's what I don't care. Like, as much as that you can get on Google, the better in the US anyway. Like, there's nothing more king right now than that. So as many times as you can get posted with your name hashtagged or whatever, when people are always going to Google you. I have the name of Fela Kuti, is a Nigerian, singer that's well known. It was a Broadway play. And I was like, how will I ever get ahead of this? And I had to do it by creating more content. And it's more, and it's like, you put in Fela, you see both of us now. Nice. That from 10 years ago, it's like, that's what I had to do. It was like every piece of content I could go to get on Google, YouTube, you put it there, whether it's stagnant or not. I still suggest you do it, even if you don't have the sweet background, even if it's just a stagnant shot. And also, as far as monetization, I monetization by every piece of equipment in this room is from me doing the podcast and like trading with people. I mean, we're talking about $100,000 worth of audio equipment. Woo! I was able to start a whole nother business with. So you have to be strategic in many different ways. It doesn't have to be, particularly money, but it could be the trade with another company and whatever you're a master in. Hey, I can do great, content, or you're the owner of this company. Let's do a trade, and getting that equipment that's going to make you more money. It's
Fela. How'd you get that couch? I want that couch.
The question is this couch, right?
Started with a little red paper clip. Is that
right? No, listen.
A little place called Wayfair.
Oh, wow, we gotta check it out. No, listen, I know it was a lot to unpack in a very short space of time, and I know that our time is pretty much running out. However, I think like a final question for each person, if you guys can briefly, answer the question. Hala, I'm gonna start with you. What did you perceive as your biggest failure when you first started out, and did that become your catalyst?
My biggest failure. Oh gosh, that was a deep question. My biggest failure when I was first starting out. I am pretty happy with my journey. Like, I feel like, so I know this is not answering your question, but I feel like everything happens for a reason. And I feel like all my failures led to my success, and I wouldn't really change it for anything. And so in terms of like what I wish I had known, I wish I had known about media buying earlier, and I wish that I didn't care so much about Apple. I used to be actually this is the perfect thing to answer your question. I used to be so focused on Apple, and all I would care about is I want to be number one on Apple. I want to be number one on Apple. Please write me an Apple podcast review. If you don't listen on Apple, I don't care about you. I want just Apple, right? And then we got wiser, and I was like, wait, only 30% or 40% of people actually listen on Apple. I'm messaging everybody on LinkedIn. They're like, but I want to see you on YouTube, or, I listen on Castbox, or I listen on Overcast. And then I put 2 and 2 together, and I was like, all right, I grew this huge following on LinkedIn, and I was one of the biggest influencers on LinkedIn. And then my podcast was like, okay. And I seemed a lot bigger than I was on my podcast. Like everybody thought I had a huge podcast, but I didn't yet. I was getting like normal downloads, nothing impressive. So I decided that I was going to team up with these different apps, and I reached out and I just shot my shot. I reached out to Podcast Republic, Castbox, Overcast, all these different apps, and they all sponsored me at once, and they all featured me in my podcast. And literally my podcast went from getting like 3,000 downloads a month to like hundreds of thousands of downloads a month. And it happened so freaking quick. And that's how I got on the cover of Podcast Magazine. That's how everything changed for me. And it was all because I was like, I was doing really good work, and I was working really hard, but I kept repeating the same thing. And it wasn't until I switched things up, then everything started to click. So I think it's important to kind of step back and be like, all right, like things are stagnant. How do I shake things up? How do I make a change? So, yeah.
That's amazing. I mean, my expressions, I mean, for persons who don't know me, I'm full of facial expressions, and I'm actually very scared that Travis is going to make me a gift, But that's amazing, when Hala said, you shoot your shot. Sometimes what happens is that we're afraid to ask persons. We're afraid to ask for help. We're afraid to collaborate. So we basically sit in the same space going absolutely where, and I think that was probably one of the biggest takeaways for me, Hala, in your story. Step back, realize what you're doing wrong, and shoot your shot. Nick, my question over to you is, do you think it's okay to rebrand your podcast after a year? Meaning you no longer desire to produce the content you have been producing and have an interest in narrowing that content some more. So let's talk about rebranding. Is it a good thing?
Absolutely. Happy to jump in there. First, I just want to say what Hala said was fire. I wish I was recording that.
Oh, thank you.
Really,
we are recording it.
Okay, good. I'm going to go back and listen to that.
Talk offline.
No, very cool. So listen, I'm about to do it. So because something's come up in my sort of world where I've been asked to join Evan Carmichael's group, and his suggestion to me was, listen, your content is so broader than just business. We want you to start having conversations which are more about scaling up your life, those sort of things. And so my rebrand of Scale Up Your Business is going to be Scale Up with Nick Bradley, because I have that branding. So, that's a bit of a big decision for me, because I was thinking, well, I've already got success with the brand that I created. It's not doing badly. It's growing, every single week and month that I'm producing content. So why would I do it? And I'm doing it because I can see it's going to take me to have conversations in a different way. It's taking me somewhere that I want to move towards. So therefore, I'm leaning into something that I've created and just extending it. So I think it depends, to your question, I think it depends why you're doing it. I think you do have to, like to what Hala said, you've got to sometimes go up to 30,000 feet. You've got to step back and create. If the brand that you've created isn't serving you, or it's not serving the audience that you want to help, and it's not communicating what you're trying to get across, then absolutely you should consider doing that. In my situation, I'm extending it because I want to move into a different space. But my background, just for context, is branding. I spent 20 years in branding. And I think sometimes people can get confused by this sort of stuff. A brand is a promise of consistency, but it only really works if it's getting the message across to the person that you want to help. And if that's not the case, then you should definitely evaluate that.
Drops mic. A brand is a
promise of consistency.
Damn, this panel is fire. A brand. Listen, I'm sure the chat is like, if you guys agree, just put a drop mic, put some mics in the chat. But that's a very good thing. But Nick, let me just ask you on the back end of that. Do you tell your audience that you're singing bye-bye? Like if you're going to kill your brand, it's no longer serving you or your community. Do you actually officially say, guys, we've come to the end, I'm going to change? Or do you just kind of cut it and ghost people?
Well, mine's an evolution, so I'm not changing. I'm not stopping the show and then starting a new one. I'm just changing the brand of it. But I feel that I've built a community of people who, to use Ben's words, they know, like, and trust me. So I'm not going to hide behind that. If anything, I'm going to explain why I'm doing it. I'm going to explain the rationale. My most loyal listeners know it anyway, because they come to me all the time and they say, I thought I was coming for this, but what you've given me is something different and I like it. So if anything, I'm really just creating the podcast and evolving the brand for that core group who are probably my raving fans anyway.
Beautiful. Ben, my question to you, which is a problem some people have in the podcasting world, whether they have a 20-minute podcast, 45-minute podcast, an hour podcast. The question is, how do I keep my listeners interested like all the way to the end? So it doesn't look like all the way up and then they just kind of drop off. You know, are there any tips as a man who's interested in storytelling? You know, are there any tips to ensure that you try to keep your listeners on for as long as possible or to the end?
Well, that's a very interesting point, because you need to sit there and you need to understand your audience. I mean, people need to look at their podcasts on a regular basis and say, where is the drop-off point? You know, am I speaking too long? If I got a 40-minute podcast and 90% of the people are gone in 30 minutes, maybe your podcast is too long. And you need to be constantly looking at yourself and saying, is the podcast serving the audience? Are we maintaining our relevance? And how do you keep that? It's by making sure that you're talking to a point. As you said, Hala, it's one story. It's being able to have one story. This is what I talk about. This is what this podcast is about. This is the angle and the direction of the story, and this is where we're going to go with it. And as soon as you start rambling, as soon as you move away from your point, as soon as you get beyond that, you're going to start losing people because you're going to confuse them. So the more you can stay on point, the more you can stay on subject, and the more you can be relevant to your time zone. I put a timer in the bottom left-hand corner, a countdown clock for every single episode. And I put a 35-minute timer because I know that it's going to be a 30-minute episode, because I don't want the alarm going off in the middle of things. So if I go 32 minutes, I go 32 minutes. But what I'm doing is I'm being very conscious of what my time is, to know this is when it's time to, okay, I need to go on to the next point. Okay, I need to go on to the next point. Okay, I need to wrap it up now, because I need to make sure by minute 32, we're saying thank you very much and hitting the stop record button.
That's a very good point, Ben. I mean, in a lot of the conversations, people speak about the vanity metrics, we speak about the downloads, we speak about monetization, but a lot of persons actually don't take the time to look at the metrics, the actual insight of the data to show you how your audience is interacting and reacting to your podcast outside of downloads and outside of reviews. John Ed, my question to you, it comes in from a person who's an attendee. They're asking, how important is the emphasis on training? You're starting a podcast, you don't know if you sound good as a host, maybe it's your voice, maybe it's intonation, Do you think training is important before someone even begins podcasting, or do you think they should just go for it?
So I think you should listen to other podcasts. That's how I learned a lot about podcasts. Podcasts changed my life because I used to drive a lot, and then radio just gets boring real quick. So that's how I started listening to podcasts. So listen to other podcasts to get an idea of what style podcast makes most sense for you. Like, why are you listening to the podcast? What do you like? What don't you like? What would you change? I think when you go on a raw, you're just going to make too many mistakes. And there are so many good examples of podcasts. Like, why not? It's free. Go download an episode and you're going to get some ideas. So I think it does make sense. And then little things like how close you are to the mic position, right? Your setup, it's easy enough to do that you might as well do it, because you're going to see that a lot of people, they don't have to do much to just be better than 90% of podcasters, right?
Mm-hmm.
I see, even as a guest, right? A lot of my guests, right? Some of them will come in with earbuds or just and it's the cheap USB mic already puts you 90% ahead. So why not do a little more, right? There was a time where you could get away with that, but now it's you want to do better. A lot of people listen to podcasts and they only hear the audio. They don't see a lot of things. So you have to make sure that you do get the colors in your voice. You do get all these things to kind of set yourself apart. So start, but just do a little research and you'll go a long way.
The other thing
Go
I
ahead,
just want to throw in Clubhouse. There's a lot of podcaster communities. I do office hours every single week. I don't do coaching. I don't have time for it. but I do want to give back. So I'll do like a 2-hour Q&A on Clubhouse, and a lot of podcasters who are experienced do this. And so I wish I had Clubhouse when I was starting out podcasting, because I feel like we drop gems in there every single day, and you can get like free coaching and just ask if you have a specific question, just go in, ask. So I would say use Clubhouse and find the different podcaster communities there. There's Club Pod. There's what's that other one that Sean Anthony has? Anybody know? I can't remember it.
Can't remember.
I can't.
Once you start going, you find there's so many. Once you start getting involved, and you'll get so much free advice.
You go to others. That's very cool. And I think the podcasting community generally loves to exchange information. Persons always genuinely want to help. So again, you don't, for those of you who are starting out, or you might be, very scared, don't worry about it. People are actually in the space, and they wouldn't mind helping you out, or at least helping you to get started. Fela, I'm leaving you with a very last question. And I'm just reminding everyone that at the end of this, I'm going to re-invite Christopher. We're going to do that digital raffle. And I hope we're included in the raffle. Right, guys? Am I right or am I right? I hope that we meet the standard to be on the digital raffle. We'll be winning.
I'll let somebody else win.
Giveaway of a microphone, courtesy of Fela right there. You have an audio engineer background. We've spoken and we've heard about the quality. I'm actually giving you the last question. We have like about 2 minutes.
Okay.
We're sending everyone off, new podcasters, people who were listening, what is your top advice for anyone who is going to either go away to improve, apart from just having a USB mic? What is the one advice you give them?
One pass USB.
One pass USB.
Okay. That, do some research, like Jeanette said. It's so many great pieces of gear out there that don't cost that much. I do have up to $1,000 mics, but we're also audiophiles, and we sell to other audio engineers. But just go, whatever your budget is, go to the max of that. $50, 150, 500, whatever, go to the max of that, find out what's the best at that level. Listen online, listen to those microphones, because you can hear the differences. Listen to it with a male voice, a female voice, notice, what's going on. And besides just at least getting a $40, $30 mic, do research from there, from wherever you're at. Just start from there, because it just can grow into what everybody is doing on this panel, and it's so many different ways that it can grow.
Lovely, guys.
And also, if anybody wants to be an affiliate for me, I've dropped that. There's I put in an email address that you can reach out to me, because we're selling all equipment that's needed for small rooms and studios, if you have a small studio and stuff like that. So, and 10% off, again, off of everything in our store.
We appreciate it. We need all the help we can get in these digital streets. Guys, thank you so very much. Podcasting on Steroids, I think, was a success. Y'all can let me know in the chat if you got some really good information, things that you can apply, whether you are thinking about starting a podcast, if you started one already and you just needed, just some, guidance or just some empowerment. And if you even are a veteran, maybe you would have learned something, just drop it in the chat. Let Christopher know, these guys have put on such a great panel. Tahala, John Ed, Nick, Fela, Ben, thank you for your time. Nick, I know it's after midnight, probably 1 a.m. in UK. Thank you so very much for giving up your time.
Thank you, Terry.
Thank you, Terry. Great job.
Thanks, guys. And of course, we would have dropped the links in the chat. You guys, please go ahead and follow these persons. They are more than just podcasters. They have so many things happening. And I'm going to now say thank you very much. It was a pleasure serving you in the capacity of host. I'm going to re-invite Christopher, and we're going to see who walks away with that microphone, courtesy of Fela. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So actually, if we could get Fela back up here real quick while we do the raffle, just so we can see her reaction when someone wins. And I'm going to go ahead and switch over to our virtual spin the wheel, and we're going to randomly select somebody. Maybe when Fala comes up. There she is. Awesome. All right, just let me know when you want me to spin it, and we can go ahead with it.
All right, let's go.
Okay, here we go.
Regina Silvera.
All right, so it looks like Regina won that one.
Congratulations.
Congratulations, Regina. And I'm going to drop off the stage if Fela or Terry has anything left that they want to say or talk about. Otherwise,
I guess we'll get your information later. But yeah, everyone for coming on and joining in. Thank you so much.
No problem. Congratulations. Thanks, Chris. And by the way, awesome and cool design here on the digital platform. Regina Silvera, you are the winner. And I'm just saying that if you don't want the microphone for whatever reason, you know, the MC, the host, the moderator gets it by default. Just saying. I think we have about 10 or 15 minutes on the platform where you guys can actually jump around the tables, network, meet each other, connect, and certainly we ask that you connect outside of this conversation. So again, it was a pleasure serving you as the moderator, as the host, saying bye-bye from my beautiful island, Jamaica. Thank you, Travis. Thank you guys for the kind compliment. It was a pleasure serving you. So Sid says networking for longer. So go have fun. Go to the tables. Take care.